So recent graduate and sort of is on his journey. So thank you so much for being with us today, Michael.
Thank you for having me. And hi, everybody.
My pleasure.
Everyone's having fun.
So Michael is a recent honors Bachelor of Commerce graduate from McMaster from the DeGroote School of Business. In his time at McMaster, he grew an appreciation for marketing, and he really believes it's one of the core facets of business and also something that's evolving very quickly. In his third year, he joined our team, and he was working as a digital marketer with us. He had quite a lot of different experiences. We're going to talk a little bit about those today, but everything from website design to Google Analytics to social media, and then video and image production as well. He worked quite closely with us on some of our podcasts, actually. He is the youngest son of two incredibly hardworking Eritrean immigrants and learned the value of hard work and determination from them. He believes everyone should have the opportunity to educate themselves and develop new skills in order to make a difference in the world. He also enjoys biking, delving into history, and discovering new music around the world. He's currently reflecting and discovering how he can use his education, passion for marketing, and determination to make the world a better place. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi. Well, thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
Glad to be part of this.
So, we talked a little bit about some of your background, your schooling, that you did intern with us, but tell us a bit about your personal journey.
So, I grew up, I was born and raised in the GTA, and I guess throughout my life, I've always really, should I connect? Or actually, yeah, I've always been drawn to the creative parts of, whether it be business, sports, all my interests. I've always been drawn in the creative aspect of it. Mm-hmm. And then in high school, I decided to apply to join be part of the business program at different schools. And eventually I chose McMaster, and in McMaster, for the first 2 years, I taken all the different disciplines of business. But I really found myself drawn towards marketing, just as I said, I've always been drawn to the creative part mm-hmm. of just everything. So marketing really challenged that, allowed me to kind of grow my creativity. Mm-hmm. And then I found myself a prepper, and now I've graduated from McMaster and am looking towards the next chapter of my career.
Yeah. So I know you've had a few different opportunities. So you worked with us, but you also did some work on campus with the promotions team, and now you've recently been hired. So what helped you to gain these opportunities, and what advice would you give to others who are looking for their sort of first experiences?
I think with all my different volunteer roles, all my different employment roles, I don't think I've really ever been afraid to try new things. Even when I applied for prepper, I didn't have some of the experience in Google Analytics or design, but I learned, and I was really able to kind of grow from that. So I didn't let these barriers stop me from applying. I dove in head first and was able to kind of learn as I went, and luckily able to also grow from there.
Right. Yeah. I think that's really important, being able to sort of put yourself out there, and, being willing to take risks is definitely an important part of ultimately getting different opportunities and kind of putting your hand up, for sure. Mm-hmm. Would you say, so just reflecting on those a bit more, was it a case of, the volunteer roles were also where you started to get some of that early experience, and that led
for sure. In my volunteer roles, even in high school and elementary school, I keep on saying the creative part, the creative aspects, but just growing from there and learning from there, and kind of just seeking the value in everything. Even in school, just seeing how everything fits together. And I think that was during my time at prepper, last summer, it allowed me to even retroactively learn things. So some of the things that you taught me, I was able to apply and say, oh, hey, I learned about this in my second year marketing class, but I'm now understanding its value now. Or I think just always, you asked about the biggest piece of advice I could give. And I think that would be to always be learning. I think.
Yeah, for sure. When you were in university and, taking different courses, I know that sometimes there can be sort of a sense that there's a lack of applicability to some of it, right? Mm-hmm. Depends on the course, and the professor, and a whole bunch of other factors. But like, how did you deal with those types of scenarios, or how did you find ways to connect it and to sort of, see the value in those courses?
I think that's a really good question. I think in the time when you're in the moment, you think to yourself, I don't know how to apply this, or I don't necessarily know how this will affect me. But like I said before, it was my time, or through experience, like my time at Prepper, I was able to really kind of retroactively learn. I was able to see, oh, this is how like this process works. This is how Google Analytics like fits in with things. This is how I'm able to kind of create a target persona or a profile of somebody and able to design or create messaging for them. And like, just always try to look for the connections, because even when you think there are no connections, there is a thread there that you can follow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So I mean, we talked about different opportunities that you've had. Like, what would be some lessons learned when you were looking for a new job? Like maybe things that you wish you had done differently, or, sometimes you have those kind of like hard lessons where you have an experience and you realize maybe you didn't put your best foot forward. Do you have any advice?
I think sometimes, like when you're applying to a job or when you're looking for opportunities, don't sell yourself short. Don't just say, oh, I haven't necessarily worked and done this if they're asking for XYZ, but looking back on your experiences, you may see, oh, I actually have done parts of X, parts of Y, parts of Z, and I'm able to kind of blend that together. And like, I know how to do these things. Don't sell yourself short, really. Mm-hmm. And yeah, don't be afraid to apply to things that seem out of your reach. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I think even when you see something that you're confused about, you can do some research on it, ask previous networks, and I think just don't be afraid. Don't sell yourself short. Be organized on top of that. Mm-hmm. I think when you're in the searching mode, you may misplace certain things, or you may not understand certain things. But I think if you're organized and you're able to look back and take certain qualifications, certain experiences, and bring them to the forefront of your mind, then that can be really helpful.
For sure. Like I've done quite a bit of the sort of screening and initial interviews, both for like interns and also for like senior consultants, right? And what's really interesting is that sometimes the resumes that stand out aren't necessarily the people with the most experience or the best experience. And I think that's something that maybe job seekers don't always realize, is that it's partially like, can you do something to differentiate? And even things like cover letters, like they have become less and less common. Like now out of, 200 applicants, we'll see like maybe 10 of them will have it. But it's really interesting because the ones that do, if they're not a good fit, like it won't fix a mismatch, but it will make us take notice because they actually, put in a bit more effort than the ones that just clicked apply on Indeed, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's a really important piece, that like, even if you're not 100% a perfect match, like if you're excited, if you're passionate about the role, because I don't know if you remember, but during the interviews, like one of the first questions we always ask is like, so why do you want to work with us, right? Yeah. And you would be shocked at the number of people who don't have an answer. Like they'll just say, oh, I wanted a marketing job. This is a marketing job. Like, I'm sorry, but that doesn't really do it, right?
Exactly. Like being the best fit, I think. Like even when I was applying, I don't know if you remember this, but I originally applied for the community manager job, but then throughout my application and like the challenge that we were given, I think you guys saw I was a best fit in the digital marketer position, and you were right, because I showed like in whether it was through the video I created, the image I created, just my experiences, I think you guys were completely right in connecting me with this position. And I think what you said about you look for someone to be the best fit, I think that's 100% right. Like I think even when on the one who's applying side, you shouldn't just apply to a role just because. You should see if it's something that you fit in, even if you don't have the experience.
Yeah. And like the passion and the excitement and like those things can carry you past certain other shortfalls. And even like the communication and soft skills. This is something that we see a lot. I'll see someone who on paper is very good in some regards, but then when you actually talk to them, communication is a bit of an issue. And like, that's really a really like critical skill, especially now. Like, so much of our work is virtual.
Mm-hmm.
We're not together in a space anymore, right? Like when you and I work together, we were, but that is not our reality. Like we do everything through Jira now, and it's all virtual, and we have, some team calls, but the reality is you have to rely on people to be good at telling you, here's where I'm at, here's where I'm blocked. And
for sure.
So those skills also, don't underestimate the importance of them.
Yeah.
I'm looking for roles, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jira is a fantastic tool. I found, like, even after the internship was done, when I was working with you during the school year, it made things so much easier to outline the tasks and what was blocked by what and what needed to be done so that the next thing can be done. I think these tools like this, especially now because everything's online, everything's starting to become virtual, are very helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Very
So, I mean, we talked a little bit about like formal education and sort of work experience, but what role has self-teaching played in your development as a marketer? And now that you've graduated, what are your plans for like ongoing learning?
So self-teaching played a big part in my growing professionally. I think things like the Hootsuite certification, or even doing the free courses on Google. Like, I remember when we spoke, you mentioned, these are some places you can look at, and things like that. Don't underestimate the value of that, even though it's like, it may seem, it's free and it's something that you could easily search online, but not that many people are doing it. Not that many people are taking those steps. So even by completing the Google Ads certification, the Google Analytics certification, doing things like the Fund program are ways that people can like self-direct themselves, self-educate themselves outside of formal education, because I think we're moving to a time where people are needing requirements outside of formal education. Yeah. And personally, I think even working at Prepper was a way to kind of educate myself, just as I was doing some things that I wasn't used to. I didn't know how, but by Google searching, YouTubing, and like learning how to do it outside of whether it be work or school, I was able to learn a lot more. That makes sense.
Yeah, there's sort of this magical place that's kind of at the edge of your abilities, right? So there's like the stuff that you can do that's really easy, right? And we all kind of have those things where I don't really need to think about this. I can just kind of do it. Even if I'm tired, I'm still going to do good because it's easy, right? But then you have those experiences where I don't really know what I'm doing, but I kind of have enough. And then to your point, like, you search for it, you have to be inquisitive, you have to be willing to like solve the problem, and you can figure it out, right? Like, there are ways that you can at least get to like a decent place on your own, and then, just work with your colleagues, work with your team, right? If you're able to do that.
Don't be afraid to ask. I think like you and Solar have like asking, you guys have taught me so much just by me saying, I don't understand this. Can you explain it to me? Or you've pointed me in the right direction and said, search this website, search this resource to learn more. And working with colleagues, there is an abundance of resources out there to help you learn.
Yeah.
I think.
And it can happen too, like, for everyone here, this can happen within your teams. Like, I've seen some teams where it's like, they're working pretty well and like you guys are learning from each other. There have also been some where like someone will say, well, I can do this, and then someone else will say, well, I want to learn that, but I don't know how to do it. And that's an opportunity for you guys to collaborate and to like teach each other, right? And help to level up. And hopefully these are, people not just within your team, but even beyond that, that they're able to continue those conversations, because it's helpful to have a network of people that you can, ask and that you can mature with and continue developing your skills. Because I think what you said earlier, Michael, about the certification and the free resources, like, it's not that those are, like, you're right, sometimes they're undervalued because they're free. But the reality is that's the new way of learning. These everything digital, whether it's development, marketing, whatever we're talking about. It changes too quickly to learn in school.
Yeah.
So if you're not learning, like 5 years from now, what are you going to do? You're going to have trouble.
Yep. And I think like right before this call, I actually read something about how Google is experimenting some sort of new certificate program that will provide like a full class, like the classic 4 years of education into a 6-month like certificate program. So even like, I think like big organizations are starting to realize that you don't need the traditional education to be able to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've sort of seen part of, so there's a couple things like the rise of the micro badge, right? Or badge in general, like digital credentials. That's become much more accepted and much more, valuable. Quite frankly, if I'm hiring someone, let's say I want to hire like a mid-level marketer, I don't really care where you went to school. I care about how much you actually know. So that comes out in the interview like pretty quick. Doesn't take long to know whether you actually have any idea what you're talking about.
Exactly.
And it's also your past work, right? So if I ask for a scenario where, tell me about a time you ran a campaign XYZ, either that's an easy question, and for some people it is, or it's very hard, right? And badges and stuff, and it's interesting to see how different companies are changing their models and their screening too. Like we're starting to realize that maybe that old model doesn't really work anymore, right? And portfolios matter more, and past work and all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So in terms of your volunteer experiences, are there any particular aspects that really stand out in terms of helping with personal growth and development? Like any specific stories or pieces that you would want to share that, you felt were really valuable?
Yeah, I think back in high school, I remember working with like the city of Mississauga to kind of tutor at-risk youth. And there was one student who was having difficulty with like mathematics. They were kind of having trouble with the numerology chapter in their like math curriculum. And I think I was able to help them kind of visualize the whole idea of like, you remember those blocks, how there's like the 1 blocks, the 10, and I kind of helped them understand and work with that to be able to understand like how numbers work, pretty much how many 1s fit in a 10 and how many 10s fit in 100 and how many 100s fit in 1,000. And just, it's about finding something that the other connects with. So they may not have understood the grid of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But I think once they were able to kind of visualize and play with something, and they were able to connect with it and were able to understand the concept. So I think when you're teaching and even when you're learning, you have to find what works for you.
Yeah.
Because some ways, some of these traditional ways may not necessarily work for you.
Yeah.
So I think you may be a visual learner. You may be someone who learns by experience. So it's just about finding that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really important. And unfortunately, it's something that some people don't find for a long time, right? Because so many experiences kind of fit into one box, right? University tends to be a certain way, college tends to be a certain way.
Exactly.
It's not until you get into the real world that you start to maybe try some other experiences. Yeah,
like I keep on talking about my time back at Prepper, but I really cannot be grateful enough that I was able to learn by that experience. Like, I think I always knew, I felt like I knew enough, but I think once I completed the internship, I was really able to understand how the past curriculum fit together just because I learned from experience rather than just being taught something and studying something.
Yeah. And it's also worth thinking about. So for all of the participants who are kind of listening in, something for you to consider personally is also, what kind of experiences are you looking for? Like, obviously when you're looking for a job, and particularly like now during COVID, we can't be super, super choosy, but at the same time, you should give some thought to, what type of team do you want to join? Because it's very different joining a very large team versus joining a very small team versus being the sole practitioner. And I've seen all of those different experiences, right? Where we had people that worked with us and then they went to work for like a really big team, like let's say like Adobe, or you know what I mean, like a company like that, or Microsoft, where you're such a small cog in the wheel, you kind of just learn about your one thing, right, within that company. But then on the other hand, if you go to a place where like there isn't, like you are the marketing department, or you are the developer, that's also quite challenging, right? Because you don't necessarily have support or other people to bounce ideas off of. So yeah,
for sure. I think like another big part of like the learning process is making sure you have a good team. You're completely right. And even if you're in a place where you're the only marketer, or you're the only one in that role, you still have a team of other people you can consult with and you can learn from. Like even like me, I learned so much from the people like doing the UX design. I learned like a lot from them, even though I wasn't necessarily involved in the website redesign process. I was able to learn.
Sort of building communities, right? So it's like keeping those networks, building those networks of people that you can reach out to and say like, hey, I don't know what to do here, or like just like joining LinkedIn groups, joining Facebook groups, or like wherever your people are. Look for them. And there are actually some really interesting professional groups on Facebook if you kind of dig for them. So it's really a case of where is the community, right? Like LinkedIn is usually my first go, but sometimes you find other groups in other places, like master class, master group type things that are really useful.
Yep, you're right. Like there are tons of online communities. Even if you choose to volunteer at a place, there's people you may connect with. You may know somebody who's working in a position, and if you feel comfortable, you could message them and say, "Hey, can we speak? Can we grab a coffee, or can we speak over the phone so I could so I can understand your role, so I can pick your brain a little." I think that's a big part. I think learning as much as you can from other people.
Yeah, that's definitely the new way of the world. So I mean, that's a really good point, right? Like reaching out to people, engaging with them, kind of having conversations. Through your different experiences, what's the best career advice you've ever received?
Best career advice I've ever received? I think one of the best pieces of career advice I got was actually from you, when you taught me the value in educating myself outside of school, outside of work, even just trying to like have the drive, have the initiative to educate myself on topics that I may have not been as comfortable as I could be, or I may not be as knowledgeable as I should be. But the best career advice, I think, would don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, and don't sell yourself short. Because I think sometimes we may think, oh man, I don't have any formal education. I don't have any experience in this. But you may have informal experience. You may also just know about a certain topic. And like you said earlier, it could reflect whatever we know or don't know reflects in our interview, in the application process. So what you know could very well be reflected in the interview process when you say, yes, I don't have experience with this, but I do know of it. I have researched, I have watched videos, I have taken courses on it. So just don't sell yourself short.
And
don't be afraid to take risks.
For sure. So we've talked a lot about learning, different ways of learning. What are you excited about learning right now?
What am I excited about learning right now? I'm honestly just excited to just take the advice that we've just reflecting on this conversation, looking at not only my education or my work experiences, but thinking of all my experiences and seeing how I could use these skills and these lessons to bring my career forward, to apply to certain things, to reach out to people. I think I have to take my own advice and reach out to people if I have with questions, and just let them know, hey, I'm interested in being in a position similar to yours. How can I get there? So I'm excited to kind of reach out to network, really.
Right. Yeah. And as a marketer, what are you most excited or passionate about?
As a marketer, I'm excited. I think I said in the beginning, growing up, I was always drawn to the creative, And I think marketing is like one of the core facets of business. I really think marketing is involved in it. I'll bring up, let's say you want to market a new soft drink, or you want to create and sell a new soft drink. I think marketing is involved in all the steps of the process, whether it be the marketing research to identify your customer base, whether it be product design to find out what design works best for the customer base that you've researched. And even after you sell it, after you've launched it and you've sold it, like marketing is still continuously required just so that you can understand who's buying your product, why are they buying it, what can you do to improve it. So I think that's what I'm most excited about. I'm most excited to use marketing in action. I'm excited to see it, to be a part of that process.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Thinking about sort of your different experiences and kind of what you learned in theory versus what you started to learn in practice, was there anything that surprised you? Were there any sort of moments that you had that were like, oh, I hadn't thought about that before? Like,
yeah. I think how marketing is more than also just being creative. I think there's also the analytical part of it, and how you need both the analytical and the creative side to really be to really excel in the role. I think you should kind of be a master of both. Understand both, understand the numbers just as much as you understand the creative. And yeah, I think that. And is there anything else?
No, I think that's a really good point, and something that sometimes I do find that people feel like they fall within one category or the other, and there certainly are jobs that fall within one.
For sure.
It's really valuable when you can bring it together, and like if you are in one, you still know enough to talk about it.
Exactly. I think like it's kind of like they're different sides of the same coin. Like even if you are completely in the creative part or completely in the analytical part, I think it would really benefit you and your career to just be able to see the other side of it and be able to take from that.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, because it's never just one side. Like we had a class, I think it was earlier this week, where we talked about digital advertising, like paid digital ads, and that was one of the things, is that you need to use analytics. You need to have metrics to look at how are these things aligned, but you also need good messaging. You need good targeting. Like you need to have good creative. If you don't, the whole thing falls apart, right? So
you need A/B testing, but you need to have something creative in both the A and the B, and then you have to be able to see which one has a better reach, which one is driving the most traffic to your site or to you.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, thank you so much, Michael. It's been a pleasure. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to send them in the chat, and we'll be happy to take them.
I'd love to answer questions.
While we're seeing if there are any other questions, in terms of marketing, is there anything that you're learning right now, or is kind of the next thing that's on your list in terms of courses? I know you talked about a few different things that you've been doing or have done. What's next for you?
I think just keeping up to date with like the world as it is changing, because we are really in unprecedented times. So I think this is the best time. Like, everyone in this program is already doing so much more than a lot of people, because they're taking this time that a lot of people are doing other things. They're taking this time to learn about a subject that interests them. Like, they're doing a lot to grow their skills in a time that the world has seemingly come to like a stop. You guys are keep on excelling, keep on pushing forward. And personally, I think I've just been looking at what's happening, like looking at the news, keeping up to date, and seeing exactly how the world needs marketing now, and seeing how we need it to going forward. Because a lot of companies are changing the way they speak to us. They're changing the way that they are designed to kind of fit our current situation.
Yeah.
And the new normal.
That's a good point. And one of the biggest things that we've seen, one of the biggest challenges, and just considerations, is about how small businesses in particular are trying to adapt. Like the large companies, they have big marketing departments. Like, yeah, some of them have taken a major hit, like travel and tourism. That industry is like really, really affected.
Exactly.
When you look at like small businesses in general, like a lot of them weren't really digital, or maybe they had a website, but they didn't have anything else. And so for them, it's like, it's marketing, but it's more than that. It's how do we digitize, right? How do we build a website? How do we build an e-commerce store? How do we connect with people when we're not in the physical world? And that's like a huge shift and like a big challenge for a lot of companies right now.
Yeah, I think like in my current role of helping with the Secret program, I see a lot of these stores, these small businesses that are being affected from the like having to shut down because of COVID, and a lot of them unfortunately didn't have the digital like infrastructure required to really survive these times. Like but a lot of just as many businesses also offer things like curbside pickup, online orders, online customer service. So I think those things really, you can't understate the value of those things.
Yeah, recognizing just how quickly things are changing, and we just need to adapt, right? I mean, that's what our world is right now. It's what I mean. Really, most businesses, to some degree, you have to do this. It's just the rate of change is really what we've seen. And the other thing that's really been fascinating is like, so one of the professors that we work with, she teaches user experience design, and there's like a degree program that she manages. And like a lot of her students in the program, their families would be like, what are you studying? Like, what is user experience design? Like, they didn't get it, right?
Yeah.
Now they get it. So now they're like, oh, this is what you're learning, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is a terrible experience. I don't like shopping on this platform. So what we're seeing is also that consumers are becoming so much more savvy and have this, like, the bar is raising really quickly for like what's an acceptable online experience. And I think that's also an important consideration for, everyone in the program, for just all of us to keep in mind that like what was good enough, like, a year ago, it's not good enough anymore. Like that's great point. Yeah. Like
that was a great point. Like I didn't even like consider that. Like even when I was talking earlier about finding the threads and connecting them, like you connected the thread between the UX design and like now how people are really starting to understand like, oh, I don't like the way this works. Like, you said it perfectly.
Yeah. But that's also that's what's partially making it so hard for small businesses, right? And so it doesn't need to be complicated solutions. It just needs to be usable, right? It needs to be good, user friendly, and for all the developers here too, this is a really important lesson. It's not always about the most complex function or like building the fanciest thing. It's about what do we actually need to build? Like what's at the core of what people want? And if you can do that, then you're in a good position.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Michael, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming back and sharing some of your experiences and some of your stories. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Yeah. For all the teams who are here, if there's any help or support or challenges that you're having on your projects, or you need anything, Adam and I are around this afternoon. So send us a message, either through Hopin or directly, and we'll be happy to meet with your teams as well.
And honestly, like if you have any questions about like my experience with looking for marketing roles, or just about like someone who's starting their career, someone who recently finished at like school, if you have any questions, please feel free to like message me. Feel free to email me. I will leave my contact info with Caitlin. And yeah, perfect. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thanks so much, Michael. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.